Today, we're going to learn why a self-watering container is actually one of the best things to have for growing tomatoes. Let's go. A self-watering container is pretty much a container that has everything that you would need to be able to grow a garden. And I will show you the different components that actually goes inside of a self-watering container. This here is called an earth box. I've actually used this earth box here since 2008. It just shows you how long I've actually had this particular type of earth box here. These things are very well made, and they also last for many years out here in the Florida sun. So let's look at the different components that we have here in an earth box. We have our fill tube here, and we also have the container itself. Now, one thing that this right here is a self-watering container, and it doesn't matter what kind of self-watering container that you have, they all work the same way. And I will explain to you with a diagram that I actually made to show you how a self-watering container works. So if you look here inside of this self-watering container here, you see you got your fill tube and you also have your aeration screen. Now, why is the aeration screen so important? Well, I will actually show you in just a second. Wait a minute. Okay. Now, what we're looking at right now is an illustration of a self-watering container. And I drew out this diagram here to show you how a self-watering container works. Here goes. So what you have right here is at the bottom of your self-watering container, you have what is your reservoir. Your reservoir can hold as much as 2 to maybe 4 gallons of water in it. The reason why you have this reservoir here is because there is something we call wicking. And it's just like a sponge, a dry sponge. Here inside of our container here, we have our potting mix. So over here in this corner here, you have a little slot here where some of the potting mix actually goes down into the reservoir and is actually where the water is that we see right here. And what happens is that your dry potting mix will actually act as a sponge, and it will start to pull water out of the reservoir, and it will go throughout your potting mix, moistening your potting mix in it as well. And also your plant roots, like for here we have a tomato plant, and your plant roots, as they grow down, the water comes up. Now, one thing nice about a self-watering container also is that it has an overfill tube. This overflow drain right over here. Now, when you put your water in through this fill tube here, it fills up your reservoir. But let's say, for instance, you walk away and you leave your hose on and you forgot to turn it off, right? It happens to every one of us, including me too. Now, one thing nice about a self-watering container, sorry about that, is that you have an overflow drain. And once the water level rises up to a certain point, the excess water actually starts to drain out. Now, it doesn't matter how much water you put into a self-watering container. One of the nice things about these things is that also you have an air gap. Like your water will only come up to a certain point, and you also have what we've shown you in that earth box I showed you. You've seen this black aeration screen. That aeration screen actually does one thing. It separates your growing mix, your potting mix here, your soilless potting mix, which is very important. You don't ever want to use soil inside of a self-watering container. You only want to use a soilless potting mix, whether it's peat-based or cocoa coir-based or a mixture of both. But you don't want to use soil inside of these things because soil will compact and it's not good on a tomato plant. Don't do it. So inside of a self-watering container, you have your aeration screen. Now, one thing that kills plants in a container is called root rot. And the bad thing about root rot is that you have a container, your plant sits in it, and then your roots pretty much are sitting constantly in water. What's going to happen? Your roots are going to drown. Your roots need oxygen. And root rot basically is when the roots are rotting, and then the plant cannot take up none of the ions that's in the side of the potting mix from the fertilizer, and the plant's going to die. I've killed numerous plants this way, and I did not understand why until I realized that, yeah, I kept watering the plants so many times, but it didn't have any drainage. That is the problem. And this right here actually helps to alleviate that problem by having an air gap. So at all times, your roots are constantly getting air, which is a good thing. And that helps prevent root rot. And in hydroponics, we also use aeration to aerate the root zone and also aerate the solution too. So that way the roots are constantly being aerated and they're also constantly getting an air supply, which is very, very important. Now, as you see over here, you have what we call a fertilizer strip. And inside of a self-watering container, you want to put your fertilizer strip as far away from your plant roots as possible. So, especially when you're using inorganic fertilizer. Now, as your plant's roots grow down, your fertilizer over time will break down too. And your plant roots will start to grow and start to fill in the box. And you have your 2 cups of fertilizer, which is inorganic. And one thing nice about self-watering containers is that you can also use an organic fertilizer of your choice. And with organic fertilizer, they said it is advised to use 3 cups instead of 2. So, as your plant roots grows, it will eventually fill in your box. And your fertilizer will start to dissipate into the box as well. Now, one thing about it is that the fertilizer that is placed inside these boxes is enough to grow, I heard, about over 50 pounds of tomatoes or so. Is that 100% true or not? I guess it depends on the variety that you grow and also depends on how vigorous the plant is. So I would say that the results, your mileage may vary. But one thing for sure is this. That right there is all the tomato plant is going to need for the whole growing season. You don't have to add anything else to it. That fertilizer strip will be all that the plant needs. But I'll let you in on a little secret. I also add C90, which is actually sea minerals. I added into my reservoir too because I want to give the plant the opportunity to take up all of the elements that's on the periodic table in perfect balance that comes out of the ocean. Just let the tomato plant itself decide when it wants to take up, okay? I don't believe that 17 essential elements and stuff is going to be enough to grow a tomato plant. I don't believe that. I believe that tomato plants can take up a whole lot more. In fact, I heard that they can take up as much as 40 elements if they're available. So let the plant decide when it wants to take up, okay? And I believe that right there will make very nutrient dense food, which is very, very important for our health as well. You also have your mulch cover. Now, one thing nice about the mulch cover is that it helps to hold in moisture, and also when it rains, your fertilizer strip won't get washed away. If you garden ordinarily in the garden and such, and you use inorganic fertilizer, well, unless it's time release, your regular granular type fertilizer is pretty much going to get washed away once it starts raining and you get a good downpour. Yeah, it's gone. That's all I can say. This stuff is going to be gone. That right there pretty much gives the full breakdown of why tomato plants grow very, very well in a self-watering container. And oh, you know what? I almost forgot. You also have what is called the dolomite line. This right here is what we call your dolomite. Dolomite is what we would call garden lime, and it also supplies calcium to your tomato plants. Now, one thing about tomato plants is that tomatoes love calcium, and if you don't give your tomatoes calcium, you will get a condition what is called blossom end rot, where you get these ugly black spots starts to develop on your tomato fruits. That's called blossom end rot, and that is basically caused by a lack of calcium. So calcium is very, very important for tomatoes. And also another thing about calcium is that it helps to balance out the pH so that your plants can be able to take up the nutrients and everything that is inside of the growing medium itself. Now, self-watering containers, like I said, you can buy those commercially or you can actually make your own. And I actually did, when I was living in Montana, actually grew a watermelon plant out of a Powerade bottle, 64-ounce Powerade bottle, by turning that into a self-watering container too. If you have any questions or comments or anything, please leave them in the comments section down below. And if you would like to know more about self-watering containers or how to build your own or anything like that right there, please let me know as well. And I want to say thank you all for watching my video, and I hope this helps you out in understanding why self-watering containers are excellent for growing tomatoes and why I don't dig in the soil really. I mean, the last time I ever dug in the soil for a garden was when I was living back home in Savannah, Georgia. With a self-watering container, you can be able to grow tomatoes any time of the year. I'm John Jr. This is Reefoponics. Thank you very much. Have a blessed day. Bye-bye.